coming on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today, and really excited because you continually find along the way these little nuggets of joy. You think these cats might have already left this planet, or or just hiding out and don't necessarily want to be contacted. But after 10 years, 2,000 interviews, and 4 books, it is really an honor to connect with one of the most gifted percussionists in the world. He came up at a time when it really seemed that you could really throw genres out the window. Everything was being mushed together and mashed together in a way that was, it was just a panoply of colors and shapes and surround. And for somebody that was born in 1978 and came up really and has been living through a very pedestrian, polite era of melodic improvisation, I tend to reach back to my guests to find out about how real music is made for my daughters and future generations' understanding of spiritual, burning music. David Friedman, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks, Jake. Glad to be here.
I just want to start by playing you this. We have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I want you to take a listen to this, pay attention to the content, and we'll come back and break it down.
Okay.
The classical people would be like, oh, you can't teach this. And so we'd write it up so it looked like a classical program, fit their pedagogy, and we teach what they want. Because we're not dummies.
No.
So it's like, yeah, man, I'll dance for you, man. It's cool. But right now, and when I realized, but as soon as I left, and as soon as David left, and as soon as you leave these big places, they tilt back to the right. Right? And so as soon as they tilt back to the right, that's where they naturally want to be. So right now we can't battle these things. Some of us have to be willing to start new things.
Right.
And it seems like a drop in the bucket. For me, it's been Creative Music Workshop here in Halifax, the middle of nowhere, one level, and I can list off the names of the great musicians who come here to teach because they want to teach this way.
Right, exactly.
They can teach.
All right, Brother Friedman, you know who that is?
Of course I do. That's my one of my best friends and colleagues, someone who I miss dearly, Jerry Granelli.
David, it is such a high honor to connect with you, man, because I did 2 interviews with Jerry, and then I knew that he had gotten very ill and actually had a miraculous surgeon who saved his life and brought him back. And I said, I have to do one more interview, and that was from May of this year, and it was so beautiful. Wow. And he's talking about you and him, basically like the people like at Berlin, like you can make this kind of wacky program. So you tailored it to a classical kind of bag, and but I'm like, Friedman, where is Friedman? And then I was so delighted to connect with you, and I really wanted to ask you, in honor of Granelli's legacy, I don't know how to say this. Jazz, when you were coming up, was still a popular music. In a lot of ways, a lot of the black musicians moved to Europe because at least they got paid for their art. Why are we in this age? Why have we become so conformist in our in the way we? Jazz was a street education, and now it is like.
Yeah.
And I just want you to talk about why we've gotten into this age of comping, conformity, and like Granelli said, a shift back to the classicalization, because that's not what jazz is. Jazz is self-expression.
Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with the political and economic the waves that undulate through our times and the things that we live with. I think when I look at the kids now, I don't know what it's like so much in the States, but I know here in Germany and in Europe, I guess, that people are very, very, very concerned about security.
Mm-hmm.
They're unbelievably talented musicians, They're individualists in a certain sense. They're doing their own thing, and the top priority is getting a professorship or a good teaching gig or something steady, you know. And I think it has a lot to do with the economic situation and the political situation of the times we live in. It's kind of there seems to be very little hope for some sort of a future that offers a kind of idealism where people live their passions, where people can do what they want. It's kind of like get a good job, make money, and raise your family, and you'll be fine. And when I was growing up, I never ever had any concerns whatsoever in terms of my financial future. Nothing. I never thought about it.
I love
Not
it.
for a second.
I love it.
You know, I mean,
No,
like,
but let's be clear though.
especially
Explain to the audience though, because you could sing for your supper through radio registry and go out at night and play crazy freaking music. I mean, just talk about why you didn't have those worries.
One of the reasons I didn't have those worries because I was always working.
Exactly.
Number one, but why was I always working? I think it's not just because I was a good player, but I think it was because of my attitude about music.
Yeah.
And my attitude about music was one where I just wanted to get out there. I wanted to play with musicians. I wanted to learn a whole bunch of new shit, and I wanted to meet the people that would inspire me. That was my high priority. It wasn't about getting a job or applying for a stipend or doing this kind of thing. I just wanted to be out there where things were pulsating, where things were happening, where there was an exchange of ideas, where people, who I admired were available as people to inspire me, and also people I eventually played with. That was the environment at that time. And of course, I was doing studio work, but during the day. But in the evening, I was rehearsing with a double image band. I would be doing jingles all day, as was Dave Samuels, and Harvey was doing other things. But I was doing jingles all day, and then we'd start rehearsals at 11 at night, and we'd go till 4 in the morning.
I really need this. Is so. But I mean, okay, so let's just go back and put a button on the other thing. Part of the issue with security is that, there aren't any gigs anymore. I mean, there's no studio scene. I mean, you could pay your rent in 1 week. So, I mean, I don't necessarily blame people for that, but I just don't think you're going to get any increase in vocabulary of music in the academy. That's all I'm getting at.
Yeah, well, and I'm not making a value judgment about the people who feel that way.
Right.
But you can generally say that people whose main priority is security are people who are insecure.
You're nailing. I love it. I mean, dude, I'd be insecure if I was walking. It would take a lot of guts to walk into M Boom. Like, did you walk into M Boom's studio and that's how you met Joe Chambers? I mean, I would. To me, at 43 years old, it's like.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is like you. So I mean, I know the loft scene. I know that, but I'm just saying, like you. Yeah. There was a different type of fearlessness that was going on at that time, because if you couldn't play, they'd just be like, get the F off the bandstand.
No, because there were certainly enough other people to, I mean, New York. If there was anything that was not lacking in New York in the '60s and '70s, was great musicians.
That's right.
They were all over the place, and the really great musicians were all working. I mean, that's one thing you have to say. I mean, if you were a mediocre musician, I mean, there was stuff you could do too. If you're a mediocre musician, you played club dates. You went down to the Union on Wednesday afternoons. I don't know if you know even that existed. But on Wednesday afternoon at Roseland, where Local 802 was, every Wednesday afternoon, the Union floor was packed with musicians and contractors.
Unbelievable.
All trying to get Saturday night and trying to get Sunday. And the contractors would, you say, anybody need Friday night in Queens? And I mean, it was packed. There was, that's what Wednesdays at Roseland on the Union floor was like. So for the people, and also, by the way, I mean, there were, Steve Kuhn, the piano player, he was making a fortune to his club dates. That's what he was doing.
Dude, I interviewed.
Yeah,
dude, by the way, Steve is. I just want to be very clear. I don't know if you know this, but Steve is not in good health.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He got COVID, man. He's not doing well. So please reach out to him if I just heard that.
Steve got COVID?
Yeah, I heard he could. Rock Alarm visited him, Bob Moses. He could barely get from the couch to the table. But anyway, reach out to him if you can. Kuhn is a genius. Okay. But I mean, this is what it was human music. It wasn't automated. I mean, we're jumping around here a lot, but I mean, how do you effectively feel, being that your education at the time coming up, North Texas and Berkeley had fledgling programs, Schillinger House. Yeah. Juilliard didn't have a jazz program. How do you feel?
No.
How do you feel like you can authentically teach younger cats when you yourself had a completely different education?
It's so funny you're saying that, because just yesterday I was sitting around with some of my students, some of my ex-students, and some of the teachers, some of my ex-students who are now professors or teaching at the Jazz Institute, and I was saying, one of the biggest ironies of my life was that I started one of the best jazz departments in Europe, if not in the world. I think it's a great jazz department. They asked me to start the jazz department. I started with nothing and started this amazing jazz department, and I never had a jazz lesson in my life.
The irony there, Friedman.
Never.
Unbelievable. I love it.
It was total fucking irony. I never had a jazz lesson in my life. I think the only jazz lesson I really had was, I remember doing a jingle with Hubert Laws in, 1971 or something like that. We were doing a Toyota commercial, and in the break, we played Green Dolphin Street. And I remember him showing me the diminished scale. And I remember...
What a classic lesson on the fly, dude, while you're getting paid at a jingle session.
Right. And I ended up working with Hubert for 3 years and recording 4 or 5 albums with him.
Can you talk about, I mean, this is, so beautiful because, I mean, I just wanted to know maybe the idea of, the guys that were there, the Dave Pikes... who were your elders in this? Mayneri was in the studios in the 50s, which you were.
Mike was my
Go ahead.
Yeah, my elder
brothers.
Sort of brothers were like Mayneri and Gary Burton, and Roy Ayers and Bobby Hutchison. And those of the jazz players,
of course.
And then there were studio players like Phil Krause and George. I can't remember his name, but I mean, there was lots of great elderly studio players. That were people who were people that I respected a great deal. I don't know if you've ever heard of Phil Krause, but he was the studio player.
Phil Krause was. Phil Krause, George Bevins. I mean, those guys were like.
George Devins.
Yeah, dude.
The guys that were my studio elders were Phil Krause, George Devins, Doug Allen, Dick Hyman, a piano player. Those are the guys that I work with in the studio all the time that were a tremendous influence. Bucky Pizzarelli, people like that. I just admired them as musicians. I really can't say that I learned about music from them, but I certainly learned about life from them.
Well, and in many ways, so can you give an example about learning about life from, these guys were so salt of the earth cats. I mean, I forget, I got to look it up. Mayneri was telling me about sitting in this radio station because they still have human beings playing the music.
Yeah.
And so explain a life lesson that you learned from one of these cats.
Well, a life lesson was they taught me that you could be a creative musician and still do studio work.
I love it.
It wasn't mutually exclusive. There were a lot of people. There was a time I did feel that I just wanted to stop doing studio work because it was exhausting me. But that was I never felt any less creative by doing studio work than I feel by being on the bandstand and playing an improvised solo. I never felt that because I learned from these guys who were unbelievably creative musicians. Dick Hyman is a composer and pianist, and actually a pretty good jazz pianist himself. And Phil Krause was a really good improviser and a great vice player. And Bucky Pizzarelli was an amazing guitar player. And I was working with Bernie Glow and all these amazing trumpet players. They were all doing studio work, but they were all extremely creative people. I don't know who was some of the other amazing piano.
Well, no, I mean, you're
Richard
first of all,
T, Steve Gadd, all the people I worked in the studio with every day. Marcus Miller, those are all the guys that I did jingles with every morning. And we'd all go out in the evening and play gigs. Randy Brecker, Mike Brecker.
Well, I mean, this is right in the pot. This is so mind blowing. I mean, let me ask you about just the idea of were you an autodidact? Where did your ears grow the most early on? You didn't ever have. I mean, you say you never had a jazz lesson outside of Green Dolphin Street with Hubert. Where did your ears grow the most? Yeah. And how did you actually learn music?
Well, I think my particular improvisation style or style of playing comes from two things. It comes from the fact that I started out as a drummer, and so it gave me a tremendous respect for time and nailing figures and nailing things and being able to play with someone like Dave Samuels, and we had absolutely perfect time together. And the other thing was the fact that I had an extremely eclectic musical upbringing. So I started out as a drummer, and then when I went to Juilliard, I was very interested in. I was never particularly interested in being a classical musician. It's never really that, but I got interested in playing Baroque music on the marimba.
Yeah.
So I did that. And then very soon in my career, I started doing contemporary music with. I was in Luciano Berio's contemporary ensemble, and I was extremely influenced by the sounds of the composers that we played, especially by him and his sense of harmony and his sense of texture, and that whole thing. When I started getting into jazz improvisation, that was a tremendous influence on my whole concept of what kind of musical sounds I wanted to create.
Go back to this. Luciano Berio was an instructor at Juilliard, or was he at Mills College?
Oh, do you know who he was?
Oh, dude! Are you kidding me? I mean, I cannot believe you were in his. Okay. Yeah, I need you to break this down immediately.
Okay, yeah. So what happened was when I was at Juilliard, Luciano was a teacher at Juilliard, and he was teaching at Mills College too, but he started teaching at Juilliard, and then he put together a group.
Oh my God!
Of nine Juilliard students who he took on the road to play his music and the music of his contemporaries, like Stockhausen, Oli Kusura, Luigi Nono, all of his contemporaries, but mostly his own music. And he took us on the road, and we were together for 2 years. We did the Spoleto Festival. We recorded his folk songs for R.C. Victor. I was on the original recording of his piece called Chemin with Walter Trampler. I was on with Kathy Barbarian singing, who was the forerunner of contemporary vocal performance, Kathy Barbarian. So I was doing all that, and at the same time, when I was doing studio work and I was starting to get into jazz and stuff like that, but that music affected me tremendously in terms of my own way of improvising. So when I started to play with Jane Ira Bloom, her thing was right up my alley. Her very angular, weird phrases and her melodic music without harmonic content was right up my alley, because that's the kind of music that I love, these weird, bizarre music with wide intervals and no tonality. and just playing these crazy tunes of hers, because that's where I had been coming from before that. And then, I was doing that before I ever got into, playing like tunes.
All right, I just want to go back to something with
Just
Berio.
like
With
that.
Berio, which records are you're probably not listed as an accompanist, but what records did you record with him on?
I recorded only. Actually, we only recorded. I only did one recording with him.
Wow.
And that's
Still absolutely remarkable. I don't think
on-
I've met anybody that had played
It's
with him.
on RCA Victor, and it's on RCA Victor, and we recorded this folk songs, and this other piece for viola with the London Symphony Orchestra, and I can't remember the name of it. But if you look on RCA Victor, the original recording of Luciano Berio's folk songs, which was a seminal piece that influenced a tremendous amount of singers and also a tremendous amount of composers. And also this piece called I had the record here recently. I was just talking about it. But
It's
anyway,
so
that
beautiful.
I think that's the only recording I did. Yeah, but I mean, and I actually introduced Luciano to Chick Corea and Keith Jarrett. Because I was living in his house in New Jersey, and I remember playing him. Remember the very first Chick Corea solo album that first came out.
He made a
And
solo.
then,
You mean as a leader? As a lead? Now he sings. Now he sobs.
Yeah, his first record on ECM was a solo record. He just
Really?
played,
I don't know
it
that
was
one.
all solo.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it's a fantastic. He plays "Song of the Wind" and all these amazing solo pieces. And I played him. I played Luciano Berio that record, and I played him "Facing You" by Keith Jarrett. And I asked Luciano what he thought, and he told me he appreciated Keith Jarrett much more than Chick.
I love the guy. Well, I mean, there was all this electronic music going on, Sabatnik. I mean, I want to go back to this angular thing. I'm not a musician. There's no theory. It's all spirit. But, I wanted to ask you, when I interviewed Bobby Hutcherson, the late great Hutcherson, he wasn't in the greatest physical health, but he told me that what he and Charles Lloyd and those guys were trying to do was really get away from the traditional 1-4-5 blues scale, the more chromatic, more out. I mean, you're playing with Joe Chambers, and when I think about, I just picked up this album, Grancher Moncour on trombone, Beaver Harris, Bobby, and Cecil McBee, and it's so out, but it's so in. And my ears normally 20 years ago couldn't handle it. Now it's like it sounds like bugle. It sounds so beautiful, and I wonder about that late 60s. If you could talk a little bit about the philosophy of the Cats, about where they were trying to take. I mean, let's face it, Miles was bored to death of bebop, So where were you going with the music at that point?
Right. I mean, I think at the time, especially in the 60s, the whole loft scene,
Yeah.
I think people, I mean, I think it was just a time of concentrated experimentalism. I think everyone...
Did you coin that phrase? I'm taking that phrase if you didn't coin that one, dude.
I just made it up.
I love it.
You're
Dude. What does that mean? Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, in other words, it's like going to a fair, and you go, and there are like 25 booths, and every one of those booths, the people are doing something different and something original, which had nothing to do with the booth next to them. That's what the loft scene was like in the 60s for me. Yeah.
Then you had I'm very familiar with Liebman, Holland, Correa, Lenny White. Where was your loft? And I want you to please talk about that.
I didn't have a loft. When they were, oddly enough, when they were doing that shit, I was on the road with Tim Buckley.
I want to save Buckley. That's how I originally got hip to Dave Friedman. We'll save I cannot believe you were with Buckley in 67?
And in 67, no, I think in 68, 68 or 69. I think I was until 70.
No, but I'm talking about like
I think
the
it
so
was
the
Tim
mid that because the loft scene.
But in the
Yeah.
60s, no, in the 60s, I wasn't involved in the loft scene absolutely ever. I observed the loft scene. I knew all the guys in the loft scene, but I wasn't active in the loft scene myself. I was at that time transitioning from being like a classical percussionist to being a jazz vibraphone player. That's what was happening to me at that time, and I was doing it through the Luciano Berio thing, and then moving into and like Tim Buckley and Hubert Laws, and just being exposed to all the stuff and becoming the house vibe player in the 70s for CTI Records, and getting to play in all the. I mean, it was all this eclectic shit that eventually congealed into one kind of statement that I think.
Oh
is mine.
my dude,
That's
you
the
are nail. Dude, it's the statement. So explain for the layperson, like the transition from classical to jazz, essentially with the vibraphone, leaving the head of the tune and playing as many bars as you wanted. Like improvisation, is it simple as that, or is it more? Is it more nuanced?
I mean, it was. I think it was less harmonic based and more melodic.
Yes, there we go.
Based,
yes,
especially the stuff. It was more based on linear improvisation, with not necessarily being led by a harmonic movement. It wasn't a harmonic, like if you play a standard tune, or a blues. I mean, the basic environment you're dealing with is a harmonic environment with a melody, and you eventually leave the melody, and then you play over the harmonies. That's what it's like when you're playing a standard tune. That's traditional jazz playing.
Yes.
And what I was doing what interested me at that time was, letting the melody, like Bach. That's why I love playing Bach. I mean, I used to play. I was one of the first people to ever record on a mallet instrument. I recorded the B minor saraband and did an improvisation on it. And I recorded on my very first record. The idea to me was let the line dictate the harmony, and not let the harmony dictate the line. That was kind of like the way I thought of that moment. The way Bach did. If you listen to like a solo violin piece by Bach, there's no chord changes. There's a harmonic structure, but the line, you hear the harmonies within the line. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I'm loving the. No, you know what it is? It's so essential.
Okay.
It's essential, but is it something that is? I would assume it's not easy to do because more people would do it.
No, it's not easy.
It's not easy to do because I mean that's the music I gravitate to. What you just described.
Okay. And if you listen, and that's kind of a little bit like what Ornette's tunes were doing too.
Right.
If you listen to Ornette, he was doing the same thing. And Jane was very much influenced by Ornette. And I have to say that, I was very influenced by Jane's composition, because they were linear compositions, very complicated melodies with lots of skips and jumps, but they generated their own kind of harmonic content. And that was something that interested me, and I loved, and that was the one thing. The other thing, I learned how to phrase from Jane, because we played so many melodies unison. For a mallet player to play a unison melody with a wind instrument is one of the best things you can ever do, because a tempered instrument playing with a non-tempered instrument, the tempered instrumentalist really learns how to phrase. That's what really got me into the kind of phrasing that I do. Right now. So it's just doing that kind of thing. So,
I'm talking to David Friedman here on the just having a ball. I mean, I need to ask you this. I believe, if I read it correctly, you started playing drums originally. Is that right?
Yeah.
So
I started out as a drummer when I was 11.
Because
and
the album that I became obsessed with David Friedman, and I'm so happy you're still here and healthy, and I hope you live for 100 more years, because I thought you were gone. The album that the album that absolutely made me a David Friedman freak is Happy Sad Tim Buckley. There's no trap drummer on that album. None.
No.
And so
Right,
how the heck did you connect with Buckley? And then ultimately, do you feel like in some ways, when I listen to that album, you're able to hold it down? I mean, you're not playing a traditional trap set, but do you think that like in some ways, at least your beginnings on the trap set lent itself for you to be able to be a timekeeper if you were the only
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. Because the nice thing about playing the vibraphone is it's a melodic percussion instrument.
Exactly.
So that you're playing melodies, but you're also playing a percussion instrument which keeps the time, and that's always something that interests me. It interests me a lot. And when and it was the same thing when I played. I don't know if you're aware of any of the record I did with Dino Zaluzzi, the Argentinian bandoneon player.
No.
Have you heard that?
No.
Oh man, you got to check it out. I played with him in like 1996, 1997. Well, I did a trio record with Dino Zaluzzi is an Argentinian bandoneon player who I met through Charlie Mariano, who's a saxophone player, and I did a trio record and did a tour with him with Anthony Cox, the bass player.
Sure.
And we did it. And we did a trio record called Rios, Rios. And it was basically marimba, bandoneon, and bass. And I played vibes as well, but mostly marimba. And it was an amazing record. I mean, it's the first record like that with that kind of instrumentation ever. I mean, before that was Piazzolla, of course. But the difference between Dino Zaluzzi and Piazzolla was a composer and a bandoneon player, but he was not an improviser. He was an extremely conservative tango musician, and Dino Zaluzzi was an improviser, and he broke totally out and was playing these amazing solos, and we played together for a year, unfortunately not longer, and we did this really wonderful record together. You have to listen to it. It's like
it sounds fantastic. It sounds right in my wheelhouse.
It's called RIOS. It's called Rios. Rivers. Yeah, and then I did another record with an accordion. Actually, two records with an accordion player. No, one record with an accordion player called Jean-Louis Martinier. Which was I was very enthralled with that sound, and also the kind of tango time feel, but not traditional tango. That didn't interest me so much. The tango time feel sort of synthesized with jazz. It's called Other Worlds. Other Worlds, WORD. I only know I mean, you should check out these records. They're really interesting and wonderful vehicles for the marimba and the vibes to do something different with improvisation.
How did you wind up going? I mean, I saw Botnick was the engineer. I'd interviewed Bruce on one of the Buckley. How did you wind up? Like, was Buckley like, I don't want a trap set?
Buckley.
Go ahead.
Okay. Do you know who John Miller is?
No.
John Miller is a bass player.
Yes.
And he was originally he was a bass player that I mean in the old days. I had a trio with a quartet with Marty Morell.
Oh my God! Where are the tapes? I need the tapes of that stuff.
And we never did a record, but Steve actually sent me a recording of something a studio thing we did, which never came out. But and the bass player was Steve Kahn, Marty Morell, myself, and John Miller, the bass player. John Miller is the New York bass player. For years he's been one of the biggest contractors in New York. He contracts all the Broadway shows, does a lot of recording sessions.
Wow, I love it.
So he's very well known and he's very big in New York. He called me in 1968, I guess so, or 69, and said there's a folk singer who's coming to town. His name is Tim Buckley. I'd never heard of him. And he said I recommended you, and he wants to come over and teach you his tunes because tomorrow we're playing at the Fillmore East.
Oh, I love it. I knew there was magic here.
Shit. Yeah. So Tim Buckley comes to my apartment on West 96th Street. This young folk singer, and we spent. I think we stopped at 4 or 5 in the morning. He taught me like 20 tunes, no music, everything by ear.
Wow.
And then the next day, I schlepped my vibes to the Fillmore East, and we played a concert opposite the Byrds and Jefferson Airplane, and that was the beginning of a 2-year stint with Tim. The next day we went to California, and played a month at the Troubadour Cafe opposite Joni Mitchell.
Friedman. No, because you know who I interviewed a while back was Lee Underwood. I think he was in that group at that time.
Yeah, he certainly was. He was there first.
So, can you talk about the concept of what? Yeah. I'm just curious about, like, was there any trap drummer at the Troubadour? Like, you were the only timekeeping, or maybe there was rhythm guitar?
As long as I played with Tim, thank God we never had a drummer. Never.
Dude, oh my God, man. Go ahead.
And in fact, Tim and I did like a week in Provincetown one summer, duo, just him and me.
Oh my God.
And I told you it was never recorded. But we went to Germany. We traveled with Frank Zappa and the Mother's Invention to England. We were on the same, because we had the same manager, Herb Cohen.
Sure.
Was Zappa's manager, and Bill and Tim's man. We did the Steve Allen show. We did. I was in California for 2 months, living at the Tropicana Hotel with all these rock bands, and playing at the Troubadour every night.
Oh my God! This is legendary, Friedman. You're making my day, man. Oh my God, this is unbelievable. So I mean, you guys hit it off. I mean, to me, like, I remember interviewing Richard Green, great fiddle player, and I mean, the vibes with Buckley, like, that instrument was so melodic and beautiful and percussive. How did it fit into a rock setting like at the Fillmore East? I mean, did you have an electronic pickup on it? I mean, how did you get it amplified?
No, not at all. We were just mic'd. That was the beautiful thing about Tim's band at that time. And if you read the book that Lee Underwood wrote, and some other guy wrote a book about it too. I mean, they said that the vibes, the sound of the group was basically because of the vibes. The vibes gave that band that particular sound for that particular time.
Absolutely.
It really was the vibes, and that band for me was a little bit like it was like the Miles Davis of folk bands, because Tim was a little bit like Miles in a certain sense, because he was a total improviser. We never ever had a set.
I love it.
We never ever.
This is exactly what we needed
here.
Yep.
And whenever it was time, and I soloed all the time, and every time I'd solo, Tim would say, "Come on, don't play that shit you played last night." I mean, I really was like playing with he was a genius musician, Tim. And so it's so a shame that he died so young. But I mean, it was like playing in the best jazz band, playing in that band. And we played.
He's like, don't play the same shit you played last night. He's a genius, man. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And it was an improvising band. It was totally improvised. And when we did the record Happy Sad.
That's my favorite Tim Buckley record, and there's no trap set. It's only David Friedman.
It was totally improvised, yeah.
Yeah.
He never ever once told me what I should play or what I shouldn't play. Should I calm? Should I not? To be honest, well, no, I'm not going to be honest, because this is a radio show, right?
No, yeah, you can be honest.
People are going to hear it.
Yeah.
Okay. I won't be honest about this one particular thing, because I don't want to insult anybody. But it was, for me, the only limitations in that, I think the only thing that I felt really bad about is that we didn't play long enough together. But at some point, I don't know who influenced him, but at some point he felt he wanted to go in another direction. And then that was the end of my collaboration with him, which I felt really bad about. I felt it could have gone much further. But I.
Well, this is you brought this up. I remember when I interviewed Louis Hayes, and he's like, oh, when he got with Oscar Peterson, it was a big struggle because Oscar's tunes were more complex, and there were specific parts, and he was telling Louis what to play. And before that, nobody ever told Louis Hayes what to play. And the masters of the music never. I mean, can you talk about not just the vibe players, but the original masters of this music that you rubbed elbows with, were on the bandstand with? Did they ever tell you what to play? And if so, how much freedom did that give you to find your own voice?
So interesting. Yeah. Never.
I knew it. That's unreal.
Never. They never, ever, none of them. Hubert Laws, Wayne Shorter. I remember doing the record with Wayne Shorter, Odyssey of Iska.
Sure.
I got on that record because of Bobby Thomas, the drummer. And I remember that was the first record with Electric Vibes, and Steve Kahn came to the session with me and helped me set it up.
Wow.
And Wayne didn't make one suggestion, nothing. I mean, I just wish that I at that time had been a little bit more adventurous and played some more shit. I was a little bit shy.
I would be a little bit intimidated. But I mean, how can you talk about psychologically how liberating that is, as opposed to being micro? I mean, you came up at a time, Elektra, which Buckley was on, was essentially a boutique label, and the bean counters were like, they were like, all right, well, I don't know, we don't know what these guys are doing, but they're making us money, so who cares? And they left you alone. And then on top of that, the leaders often were not micromanagers. How did it help you find your own voice?
But by having the freedom to do so. That's how anyone finds their own voice. The only way you can find your own voice is by using freedom constructively. That's the only way.
That is dude. Are you going to coin that? That's a sick. What does that mean? Explain using freedom constructively.
Well, I mean, in other words, it's like if you play a free piece. If I'm playing like a spontaneous composition, which I do a lot. The idea is not. It's not the idea of freedom that you can play whatever you want. Doesn't make any difference.
Right.
Just make it as out as possible, as loud as possible. To me, if you're going to play a spontaneous composition, you need even more discipline than if you're playing a piece of written music, because the written music it's all written. You just play what's there.
Right.
But if you're improvising a free piece, you're constantly aware of the interaction, the form, where it's going, not repeating yourself, or maybe repeating yourself if you think there's something worthwhile about the thing you just played. So you kind of have to remember what you played before. So either you repeat it again or you develop it. And then you're always thinking of the form. And I've always noticed that my best free playing and the best free pieces I've ever heard are pieces that have form and content. Those are the real great free pieces, and that's to me what improvising is like. You always have to be conscious. You have to be conscious of form and structure, because without form and structure, it's bullshit.
I mean,
you can quote me on that.
Well, you're going to be quoted on that. I mean, what is the closest thing that you can give your students, or that you've been able, at this program that you've built up, that you feel is like authentically the greatest thing that they can take away with them? I mean, the Schillinger House in Boston. I mean, I guess it was maybe someone like Charlie Mariano would come off the road and either try to clean up if he was trying to kick a habit, or he'd learn a new instrument, and then he'd get back. He was already an established musician. He was already working. And now you have these situations where you're going to school, going in potentially into debt, no guarantee of a job. But as a professor, I'm just asking, what's the most satisfying thing that you found that says, this seems like something I might have done back in the day, a loft session, jam rooms. I mean, Kenny
Okay.
Burrell's talk. So just break down what is most authentic to the way you
I can
were.
tell you exactly.
Go ahead.
I don't have. It's nothing mystical, and it's nothing. I can tell you exactly what it is. There are two things that I think that I did right, and that I think that I reaped the fruits of that by seeing how my students developed and went on their own path. The first thing is, I think that I gave students the courage to answer their own questions. Number one, and number two, that I'm very happy that most of my students don't sound like me.
That's the key. That's the thing. You do not want the kids coming out sounding like their professor. Yeah.
A lot of people, I gave them the courage to. I mentored them. I accompanied them on the journey, but I never ever put them in any kind of constrictive, any kind of chains or any kind of of musical prison where they had to do exactly what I said or sound like. They always. That's to me. That's the essence of teaching, is accompanying someone on a journey where you're kind of on the same level, except one has more experience than the other. And you learn from each other. Basically, if you're not learning from each other, then it's not a successful journey.
It's beautifully put. Were you somebody that I know you played with Damum Ramau, but did you learn not the timpani and things, but did you play ethnic percussion instruments outside of vibraphone?
Ethnic percussion,
like cuicas or shaker. I'm saying,
I played tambourine in the studios.
a lot of times it says vibraphone. It says vibraphone, gongs, marimbas. I'm just wondering
That's me.
But if but were you crossing paths with because that was the magical thing. Airto came to the city. He couldn't speak any English.
I played with all those cats. Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah,
it was like America, man. That was America, man.
Yeah, that's who you play with. I mean, I played with Ruben Bassini. I don't know if you know who he was. He was a really good studio, like a Brazilian studio player. With Dom, I played with Don Elias. I played. I don't know. I played with Sammy Figueroa, and all these cats, and Trilak Gurtu, but they did their thing and I did my thing. I never learned to play tablas or congas. I had to play congas in the studios occasionally. I was terrible. It was embarrassing.
So when you got back from California, what was the gig? Were you playing at Slugs? Where were you? What was how did you get in with Joe Chambers? How did you connect? What was the gig you had?
I don't remember. The weird thing is, I think Warren Smith recommended me.
Dude, one of my favorite. But I love that man, dude. Jesus, I love that man.
Yeah, I think Warren recommended me, and I didn't play with Joe Chambers before that, and then after that, the only time I played with Joe Chambers after that was on the Chet Baker record.
Wow.
Which I hope you know.
Well, was it live at Carnegie?
No.
Oh, wait, hold on. Friedman, you're putting me on the spot here, dude. Wait, hold on a second.
Oh man.
I thought you played on Al Morvadiv or some Joe Chambers album. I forget the name of it.
I did play on that Joe. I did play on that Joe Chambers album, but that was the first time. But then we actually played together in a band, just like a jazz improvisational setting. Other than that, in 1985, when I did a record with Chet Baker called Peace.
Okay, well, you're the original. Sorry, 1974. She was too good to me. You're on that one, but you're telling me mid 80s with Chambers.
Yeah. I was just playing studio parts. That was a CGI record. I was just playing studio parts.
I want you to talk a little. This is really important. When you being the house vibe player at CTI, that meant you were going over to Rudy Van Gelder's. Yeah. Were you recording? Were you overdubbing, or were you hitting live with the bands?
I was doing both. I was recording live with Hubert Laws. I was recording live on Don Sebesky's records.
That's right.
I was overdubbing, and actually overdubbed, which nobody knows. You know that Milt Jackson record, Little Sunflower?
Oh,
you know that
dude, are you? Wait, don't even tell me you're what? What did you overdub?
There's a tune where I overdubbed the melody that Milt screwed up, and when I got to the studio, they had a pair of Freddie Albright mallets, the mallets that Milt used to use, and Creed Taylor told me to play this melody. That's all I did. I just played the melody to some tune. And that was, and I played. You
don't, because I mean, there was like People Make the World Go Round. You don't know what tune it was, because I know that record backwards and forwards. I would love to know. You got on there.
I can't remember what tune it was.
Oh my God, is that great? That is priceless.
Finished it, and Milton never ever knew. He never knew that it was.
That's what I want to ask you.
He would have hated it.
Now I want to ask you something, because I remember Emil Richards, my dear late uncle. He told me, he's like, when I was in New York, Milt Jackson had the saddest, crappiest looking vibraphone. And in fact, I saw it at Mickey Roker's place in Philly before he passed. And he goes, but the sound and the soul that he got out of that instrument was profound. And I just wanted you to talk about maybe a time when, how you learned to generate sonic expansion and just sort of soul through yourself. Like, even though, because you maybe something was out of tune or it was broken, but you think, I mean, you know, for the piano players like McCoy sometimes, or Joe Sample, they'd wind up at a club and they'd be like, what kind of dog? They'd have piano keys missing. They have to bang the thing back into tune. Can you talk about overcoming all that and just letting your soul? Because that's what Milt did, man. Milt was like a magician.
Well, I mean, I don't know what to say about that, but let me just, before I do that, let me tell you an amazing Milt Jackson story.
Please.
Because I'm talking about Milt Jackson's sound. I mean, the one thing that I always admired about Milt was the sound that he got on the vibes. I mean, his touch and his way of phrasing, and the thing is, and I noticed it about myself too, but I noticed that later in life, it doesn't make any difference what mallet you play or what instrument you play. It has to do with the projection of your sound through your hands.
That's it.
And the way that you conceptualize it. And that's what that took me years to develop, and I think that I have that now. But, so I was doing the Berlin Jazz Festival. I think it was 1981. It could have been 81, or maybe it was later. Maybe it was it was 1992. I was doing the Berlin Jazz Festival, and I was playing there at that was the time I was playing with Jane Ira Bloom. Emily Remler was playing guitar. Wow. Daniel Lemaire was playing drums, and Mike Richmond was playing bass.
Oh, Mike, man! I just interviewed
That was
Mike.
the band, then, right?
Unreal, man.
I know.
Unreal.
And I was playing the Yamaha vibes, and Milt always played the old Deegan vibraphone. What that Emil was talking about? That old.
Yes.
You know, he played the Deegan vibraphone. So the head of the festival came up to me and he said, "Listen, would you mind lending your vibes to Milt for his sets?" He was playing on the same night. And I said, "It would be an honor." Are you kidding me? Said, okay.
Yeah.
He said, "Is it okay if he comes back and tries the instrument?" I said, "Sure." So he came back into our room where the vibes were. I gave him my mallets, which are totally different from his. They're much harder and they have much thinner heads. And he played on a Yamaha vibraphone, my vibraphone, which sounded totally different from his. He played like 4 notes, and he sounded like Milt Jackson.
Oh, my gosh. What is it, when you talked about that very poetic thing, the projection through your hands, how did you said you've gotten to that point now. How did you cultivate that?
I don't know. I think it's something that just because it has to do with your own aesthetic taste, what you like to hear.
Right.
And I was always, and I think I'm one of the few vibe players who phrases really more like a like a non-tempered, like a singer or like a saxophone player, or perhaps, using dampening techniques and stuff like that and all that business. And so I was always very aware of the sound that I wanted to project. I was always dissatisfied with the coldness of the vibraphone bars, and I always wanted to make them bend. I wanted to make them feel like rubber rather than feel like.
I love this. I freaking love this stuff, man. Jesus.
Yeah. So that's what I did. And what amazed me, so a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't play on that instrument. It doesn't sound like me," or "I can't play those drums," or "No, can you give me other sticks? I can't play with those sticks." And Milt Jackson took my mallets, which have a very, very specific sound, which is not his sound at all, on a Yamaha vibraphone, which is a much different sounding instrument than his, and he played 4 notes, and he sounded like himself. What can I say? I got goosebumps. It was like, I said, that's what it means. That's what it means to project your sound. That's what it means to have such a strong concept of your own sound, what you want to hear, and projecting that into the audience. That's what it means.
When I've done a bunch of interviews with Jim Keltner. He said he was in the studio with Booker T. Jones when they were doing Bill Withers' early albums, and he said Bill Withers was like, Al Jackson's coming in to do a couple of cuts, and Keltner's like, "Do you mind if I stick around?" And Booker's like, "Sure." So he expected, Al Jackson's kit to be in there, all tuned, and perfect, and this hippie comes in with like some like glam rock, really crappy looking drum kit, and Jim's like, "This guy's gonna play on that." He walks in with granted he had his sticks. He walked in with a pair of sticks, and they knocked out "Ain't No Sunshine" in one take. There's something about the soul, man. There's something about it's like projection. You say projection of your sound. I say projection of your soul.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Okay. Well,
there's no right or wrong. I'm just saying that to me is magic.
You and I happen to agree. I would never. I guess I would never say that. Yes, of course that's true. I guess I would never write that down or say that in public, because I guess it sounds a little bit too esoteric for most people.
Well, no, because the problem is everything needs to be quantified now. This is unquantifiable stuff, But I dig. Listen, we have to do set 2, but before we wrap up set 1, I just want to give you. I'm going to name a few cats that have recently left us, and I just want you to free associate or give me a good story about them. The first one is George Mraz.
Oh.
Because my favorite album outside of the Buckley album is the Horace C. Arnold album. There's a lot of dampening techniques.
Oh, right.
You do sound insane on that album. Very different than most vibe albums. I've never heard of vibes like that.
What's the name of the record again?
Tribe.
Tribe, right?
It's filthy, dude. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a very nice record.
And Mraz is on that. Mraz is on that record. I just, I never got to interview George, but I know he was a first ballot Hall of Famer, and you take it away.
George, I thought George was the greatest living bass player.
Wow.
I still think, in a lot of ways, George was the greatest living bass player. I played a lot with George. In fact, when I got this gig in Switzerland to do this thing at a school at the international school in Switzerland, they had a music program. I brought over George and Peter Donald. Do you know Peter Donald, the drummer?
Sure.
Yeah, he played with Richie Byrack and Abercrombie in that band.
I love it.
For ECM. And also, I used to do for Horace. The way I met Horace Arnold was, he came over and jammed at my apartment in 96 Street once. He called me up, and I said, "Yeah, come on over and play." And he came over, and brought over. Who did he bring? He brought over Hubert Laws to come. He jammed with us, and then once, and he came over with Paul Motion.
Wow.
Paul Motion. He got up and Paul Motion jammed at my apartment on 96th
Oh
Street.
my dude, the Sufi man. He was a Sufi. I love that cat.
It was unbelievable.
Oh my God.
And then Horace started doing the school concerts. It was I can't remember the name of it. It was we used to do 2 concerts in the morning. Like the first one was at like 8:30, and the second one was like 9:50. And all over Manhattan, in the Bronx and Brooklyn and in the inner city. I mean, we played in some of the worst sections in the world of the Bronx. And
I'm sorry, these were outdoor concerts at high schools or indoor?
The idea was we were talking about improvisation with school kids.
That was the pinnacle of America. I know it was the ghettos.
Yeah,
but it doesn't matter.
And we played in the schools where the kids would say, "Hey, white man, get off the stage," and that kind of shit. But
you could play. You hung in there. You belonged. Yeah.
Oh, unbelievable. The band was Horace on drums.
Yep.
Mike Lawrence on trumpet. I don't know if you remember who he was.
Dude, a beast, man. He left us too early. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Mike Lawrence, Horace, George Mraz, and myself. That was the band.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that was the band that we did school concerts with. It was like unbelievable. We'd start out by playing Sunny. Sunny.
Sure. Oh my God, are you kidding me?
And then we'd stop, and then Horace would ask the kids, which if we played the tune once, and then we play it again, and the kids had to raise their hands when they thought we were improvising and not playing the written melody. It was actually amazing. It was so much fun. But the bizarre thing was that I used to pick up George at 7:45 in the morning at his apartment, and George liked to drink sometimes. And he would come outside. His eyes were like red, like cranberries. And then we'd go to the first gig. And man, it was unbelievable. He played his ass off.
Oh my God, that is. Now I was going to say it wasn't called the Jazzmobile, was it, or anything like that?
No, that was something else. It was called.
I mean, this is important. And there were no. I know you played on Pursuit of the 27th Man, but there was no recordings of this Schoolhouse Jam. There's nothing going on.
No, they never recorded. No.
Oh my God.
And unfortunately, I have no recordings of me playing with Mike Lawrence.
Oh, that dude was a monster, dude. Now I've heard him on Joe Henderson records. So Mraz he would stumble in. You guys play like a 45-minute set, and then, or you play a tune and be like, and then you'd be like, when were we improvising?
We'd play like 2 or 3 tunes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do shit like that, and then we go to the next school, and that was it for the day.
Was there any I don't know how to say it, was Horace just like, yeah, man, just leave the head of the tune? To me, as a kid, if I was to soak that in at that age would be miraculous, insane.
Yeah, I mean, it was most of the time it was over their head, but they either enjoyed it or they were too rowdy to even get into the music. In some of the schools they were so rowdy, we had to get out.
Wow, and because he brought in a mixed band. Yeah, I mean that was. So then the next cat.
And the other time when George could make it, by the way, the bass player was. He used to teach in the new school. He played with Coltrane. What was his name?
Oh, Reggie Workman.
Reggie Workman.
Right. Legend. Dude, Reggie. I mean,
right.
The next cat I want to ask you about. One of my most important mentors on my journey was Pat Martino.
I never met him.
I'm not surprised. He was so under the radar. He's such a badass. I mean, did you see him play ever? You knew of him, obviously.
Oh, sure. I knew. And not only that, but, because Steve Kahn was my best friend for so many years, and we're still very close.
I love Steve, man.
Steve was a Pat Martino
freak.
Pat Martino was Steve's hero.
Yeah.
Pat Martino was Steve's idol. He used to transcribe his solos. So I got to know Pat Metheny. I got to know Pat Martinez and Steve Kahn.
I dig.
So Steve Kahn. In fact, I got to know Wes Montgomery through Steve Kahn.
Wait,
Yeah.
Wes, Steve got to be friends with Wes?
No. I got to know the music.
Oh, the music. I dig. That's beautiful.
I was never so much into Wes Montgomery, but when I met Steve and we started playing together, he loved to play 4-in-1. Do 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 do
Sure.
do 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 do. So so I used to listen to Wes because of Steve.
Well, and Buddy played vibes, right?
So-
Buddy Montgomery played vibes. But
Oh sure, yeah. And Claire Fisher.
I want to end set one with where we started because I know I can feel his spirit, and I never met him, and obviously was not even born when his career was well underway with the LSD band with Noel Jukes and Fred Marshall and playing with John Hendricks and Vince Guaraldi. But did you go to Naropa and play with Brother Grinelli? How did you meet Grinelli?
Never.
How did you meet him?
How I met Grinelli?
Yeah.
It's amazing. How I met Grinelli was that we were looking for a drum professor at the university in Berlin.
Sure.
And I didn't actually know. I knew we were going to write the position, advertise the position, and people would apply. But I felt like I wanted to talk to someone. I wanted to, get someone who would be good and talk to them before they just heard about it. So Jane Ira Bloom recommended Jerry Grinelli, who I'd never heard of before Jane mentioned him. Never heard of Jerry. And I remember calling Jerry and inviting him to come to Berlin to do a workshop. At that time, I was heading the department.
Wow.
And I remember going with my son at the time, who was like 6 months old in a baby carriage, going to the Domus Hotel, which is the hotel where Jerry was staying, and that's the hotel where Eric Dolphy died, by the way.
Wow.
In Berlin.
Wow.
And I remember picking Jerry up, introducing myself, going out for lunch with him and my son when he was really little, and then he became the professor, and then we started our friendship and playing together, and it was our journey was a long and very intense one.
You
Really
what
great.
do you feel? What is your sort of wish or hope coming out of the pandemic? So many of my uncles and elders have not. Maybe we'll never see the bandstand again, and we've lost a lot of people. But just from your point of view, staying healthy and being grateful, has your attitude changed? Is something different now coming? I mean, do you have any kind of wisdom or inspiration, especially for cats that are scuffling because, like we talked about, they don't know how they're going to put bread on the table, and they're thinking about leaving music, even though it's the only thing that feeds them spiritually.
I hope they don't have to do that. I mean, that would be. I found that tragic. Yeah. Because I think that's something that shouldn't have happened because of the pandemic. That art, I think art was, even in this country, was very much neglected. That the art, there was too little attention given to keeping art alive and keeping and letting keeping the jazz clubs open when it would have been possible. It wasn't a health hazard, but it just, people just didn't see how incredibly important art is for a society. That it kind of went by the wayside. Not just music, but theater and museums and drama and everything. It's for some reason that we still live in a society that thinks that art is expendable. Banks aren't expendable. Airlines aren't expendable.
I'm telling you, man, the vibration, this was happening well before the pandemic too. The idea that
of course, there's nothing that happened in the pandemic that wasn't happening before. It just exacerbated it.
It completely. No, you know what was
difference.
crazy is that
There's nothing new that happened in the pandemic. That's what I keep telling people. Nothing new is happening. It's just like looking at what was happening before under a magnifying glass. That's the only reason. That's the only difference.
I will say this, that I took it for granted that before the pandemic, even though there was, the domestic touring circuit in the United States was shot and things like that, still, every night in every major city in the world, you were probably getting a few dozen live musical experiences every night. And that raised the overall universal vibration to a high. It kept it high, and the fact that it's been reduced to almost the overall universal vibration is so low, it worries me because we're heading into the dysfunction is so toxic, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's no rhythm and no vibration out there on a consistent basis. It's really troubling for me, and the fact that it wasn't prioritized before the pandemic, I worry about. Yeah. I just to think that you guys were in inner city schools, whether or not the kids were listening, they had instruments, you were promoting improvisation, music was seen as a livelihood, and now it's, you can pay to play or you can play for the door. I think it's really humbling stuff, man. I really think it's very dangerous for a society.
Yeah. It's always, but it's always been like that. I've never known it to be any different. I mean, it's not a big surprise, I think, but if there's something that we can have learned, and I think there's certainly things that we can learn from this pandemic. And
what do you think the most important thing is we learn? What is the most important thing that we can learn coming out of this?
Is to value what we have and don't take anything for granted and live every moment as if it's your last. I mean, this is. I mean, to appreciate the moment, value what you have, and nurture it.
I love
it. That's the only thing we can learn. I mean, what I was doing during the pandemic, I was home. I was making videos and putting them on Facebook, and it was amazing how people would write to me and say, "Oh, thank you so much. That's such a beautiful version of whatever tune it was." He said, "It really raises my spirits during this terrible, terrible time." And I said, thank you so much for doing that for us. I mean, I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for me.
Sure. That's the most, we got to do it for you, man. Yeah.
But,
yeah. No, but those ripple effects are vital. I am with you, man.
Yeah.
Be here now, man. Yeah. Be here now and treasure it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's all about. I mean, and I know especially in Germany, the Germans are a nation of complainers. They're always kvetching and bitching about something. They're never satisfied, but that's not just in Germany, it's everywhere.
Sure.
We're also involved in this neo-capitalist concept of, things have to grow. Things have to develop.
Keep growing bigger. Yeah,
now.
Right, yeah.
It has to be bigger. The per capita has to be large. We have to have a bigger profit margin next year. Why?
It's just that's why we're headed off the cliff, man. Because it's not.
Yeah.
It's like you have to make a better profit than $38 billion. Where's the
exactly right.
I just don't get it. Then at the end of the day, most of those people are pretty miserable anyway. Because, and listen, my hope is that cats like yourself are able to. You are you're part of the link in the chain and the lineage, and I just hope that we can get to a point when you guys can really continue to do meaningful service as healers. Music is a healing force. We have a lot more to get to, man. So let's do set 2 real soon, man. But it was such an honor to connect with you, man.
Yeah, well, I'd love to. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jake. It was such a pleasure.
Yeah, man. We'll do it again, man. We got through some stuff. We got more to do.
Okay.
All right, dude.
So. I've got lots of stories. Okay.
Much love. Take care, man.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Later. Great day on the Jake Feinberg Show. Gary Malaber, and then the vibraphonist David Friedman. That's it for now on Power Talk. We'll see you later.